members, council members Gregory and Waring. They have not joined yet, but staff contacted them.
All right. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing? And who I got there? Matt?
Doing fine, Mayor.
Andrew and there you
Kathy.
are. Kathy.
Matt.
Hey, gotcha.
And Councilmember Gregory is signing on now.
All
And
right.
we are up on YouTube.
So, welcome everybody. I think we'll go ahead and get started. And Amy couldn't be with us this afternoon, as you heard or know. And the great thing is that she and the staff do such an excellent job about putting all this information together in a PowerPoint that we're able to at least go through it and glean from it most of the basic information. Andrew and Kathy and Matt are here to help us with any questions as we go. And then we'll take it all in for information. And if we have further questions, we know that Amy will be able to get back to us. So I'm just going to start with a moment of silence, if you will. We pray. I won't stay completely silent because I want to thank our and remember our city council members and candidates who run for office and give their lives and time to this public service. And I thank the Lord for the commitment and the time, energy, dedication that you give to our citizens here in the city of Charleston. And a further moment of silence for your own personal prayers. In God's name we pray, amen. All right, so let me see if I can share my screen here with everyone. How did that work?
Yeah, good.
The one thing I don't know how to do, there's probably some click I can make that just shows you the one slide versus the ones over at the side as well. Does anybody know how to do that?
So Mayor, if you look at the lower right-hand corner of your screen, you see a Zoom bar. Right before that, it looks like a little projector screen.
Yeah.
There, you click on that.
Ah. Okay. Gotcha.
Great.
And then I guess I do this to go from one screen to the next. Got it. All right. So we did want to just advise the committee members that we have a request from the Downtown Alliance when we form, if council approves it, this new business improvement district for King Street, that it include an annual contribution from the city. And I guess in other bids around the country, sometimes the local municipality will contribute to it, and so they're making that request to us. I mean, the whole purpose of a bid is to set up extra services that the city, the municipality, would not normally provide, an extra level of cleaning or security. And as you'll see in the bid approval that comes to us soon, they have a whole menu of those extra services that they will be providing to the district. So anyway, they're making that request. It's not in our proposed budget at this point, but it just arrived, I think, the other day, and thought we would make council aware that they've requested, I think it was $250,000. So Robert Summerfield, do you have anything to add to what I just said? Does that ring true, what I just said?
Absolutely, sir. So yes, so in addition to the proceeds that would come from the bid, in their budget, they've indicated that they will make annual requests to both the county and to the city for some governmental contributions to the improvement district. This would be somewhat on par with what the bid in Columbia does, where the city of Columbia puts in some money as well. And then our financial contributions will also give us voting rights on the Alliance board as well, just so everybody's clear. We will be on the Alliance board regardless, but we would be in an advisory capacity absent funding contribution.
I see. And this matter, the Business Improvement District is coming to council at our next meeting, correct?
Yes, sir. So at Ways and Means on next Tuesday, there will be the resolution to set the public hearing and to introduce the improvement plan for the bid. It's the first step in the establishment of that business improvement district.
Right. But I would note that the funding request is a separate issue in a way. I mean, we can approve the business improvement district without agreeing to the annual contribution, correct?
Yes, sir. So yes, this funding request is completely separate and apart. And in our discussions with the Downtown Alliance, it's been very clear that this would be an annual request by the Alliance with an annual decision by the City Council, and approval in 1 year doesn't necessarily constitute an expectation for an approval in a subsequent year.
Right.
Mr. Mayor?
All right. Councilmember Gregory.
Yeah, what do we put down there now? I mean, because I agree with you. I think that with or without this, haven't we been improving the district and maintaining the district through security and everything else?
I certainly feel that we have. I feel that we have. Sometimes I see a letter to the editor, and we have some citizens who don't think so, but we've certainly, in the last year and a half particularly, been dedicating some more resources. We had an independent committee that looked at various things. I've had department heads periodically walking up and down the street to make them fix things and make improvements. There's always more you can do, but I feel like we've made a very good faith effort over the last year. And Meg Thompson has been doing, I think, a terrific job. But I mean, can you always do better and more? Sure.
I guess my question is, what will this add that we're not doing now? And maybe that's a Summerfield question.
So through you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, so Councilman, so what they would specifically use the city contribution for would be to take on and continue to do a holiday plan for King Street. So holiday lights this year, the CVA has come forward with some resources for the street, with the palm trees and the joy signs and some other stuff. But in future years, that would be taken over by the bid. So that would be something the city would not be covering costs for. And then the ambassador program that they're proposing to do, which again is a part of the clean and safe, it would put more eyes on the street, not necessarily law enforcement or security, but it would be folks that would be on the street that can call the police if there is a situation, who can report problems, code issues, broken bluestone, things like that are out there on a regular basis and can serve as in an ambassador capacity, if you would, with the community. So those would be the two things that they would be using the city funding for. And those would be things in addition that are in addition to anything the city is currently doing out there on King Street.
And my follow-up then is, don't we have code enforcement officers? Don't we have public safety through Charleston Police Department that does some of what they're talking about? Are we duplicating here?
So again, in these bids, there's usually a group. Again, it's not, sometimes they're called ambassadors, sometimes they're called downtown explorers. They are much more of a kind of eyes on the sidewalk kind of thing. They're not public safety officers, so they don't have any policing powers or authority in that context. They're not code enforcement or livability officers. They don't write tickets, and mostly are livability, they are stretched and they're doing more complaint driven stuff. These folks would actually be out there helping people find their way to the shops and everything else, pointing out directions when people are looking a little lost, things like that. Again, not a city program. This would be the bid program that would be handling this. This would not be a city program. This is one of the things that the bid would, one of the services that they would go forward with if the bid is approved and funded.
So having those eyes on the street is important, and be it helping someone along their way or guiding them, or noting that some trash needs to be picked up, or noting that a homeless individual needs some assistance finding his way to our navigation center, or whatever's happening on the street. It's almost like an extension of ourselves, and I guess in some ways it could feel duplicative, but I mean that's the whole point, is to elevate, to up our game in terms of service and cleanliness and public safety, and they kind of will fulfill a combination of those roles.
Yeah, more than duplicative is additive. So again, it's not meant to duplicate or take over any services. It's really meant to be an addition to services that are already being provided in the district.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
so this sounds all fine and dandy, but if we're going to spend more money on downtown King Street, where is the money we're going to be serving in West Ashley? I mean, there are corridors of San Wittenberg Boulevard that need exactly what you're talking about. The beautification, and we've talked a little bit about this at our revitalization commission meetings, but there's certain areas along that corridor, there's certain areas along Old Town Road, there's certain areas around St. Andrews Boulevard, there's certain areas around Savannah Highway. I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but what you're talking about, as far as some of the things that you and Robert have mentioned, are things that I like to see money being redirected towards West Ashley for these sort of things. I mean, one of the things that, and I'm not saying this as a way of impeding what we need to be doing on King Street. I know the importance of King Street as our economic engine, but here's a problem. And maybe my other colleagues will address this along with me. But my constituents, when I talk to them, they are not inclined to participate and patronize as much of the downtown businesses that are more in tune with them being catering to tourists and visitors to the city.
Right.
But here we have an opportunity to create an environment along some of these strips of commercial activity to generate what you have described as for holiday shopping, for improvements to make this more attractive and boost some of the businesses in West Ashley. I mean, I just don't, the Councilmember Gregory's point about, are we duplicating something that already exists? If we're going to do that, I like to see something more directed towards West Ashley. Spending money on stuff.
Your point is well taken, but let me remind you that the Business Improvement District is mostly funded by the property owners. And boy, if the Avondale business owners wanted to form a business improvement district, that would be great. And they can organize and work with us and do the same. So you got two issues here. One that we'll talk about Friday at Ways and Means to allow a grassroots group of property owners who want to basically impose a fee upon themselves, not city money, that would add a extra layer of services for their district. Then there's a separate issue. Once they do that, is the city willing to chip in a little bit into the till as well per their request? You don't have to. You could say, well, gee, we're not going to do that until we do some West Ashley. I don't know. You can make that argument. But the concept of the district itself, I don't want to, I think is a good one. I think it's one that our central business district, frankly, has needed for a long time. And it brings more investment from our property owners and business owners. It brings, adds more stake to the game, so to speak, on how everything looks and operates. So in the long run, I think it's a good thing to do. Then it's a separate decision whether we as council want to add some other city funds per their request to that budget.
And Mayor, I agree with that, and I think that's an important distinction. But I don't think, and maybe this is something we can talk about next week when we have our revitalization commission meeting. But I think that we need to have a little bit of a push to make sure that we try to organize these kind of bids, these BIDs in these West Ashley areas. I left out Avondale. My apologies to the Avondale folks, but I think that that is a good idea. And before we get to the next level about talking about funding, that may be something that needs to be included in that conversation.
Yeah. All right, Councilmember Jackson.
Yeah, I totally agree that there are other areas and, other parts of our city that could definitely benefit from having some sort of improvement district. Folly Road is the Rethink Folly Road corridor, and that's an opportunity. I don't know, legally, can we create a business district that goes across the jurisdictions, but we can each do our own, just like we've done the Folly Road overlay zoning and the steering committee where we share resources to put in the new bike and ped pass. So I would definitely encourage everyone to go along on, let's see how many of these we can do. I just have one simple question for the money that is currently being asked for by the King Street bid. So is that 250,000 found anywhere in the staff suggested budget, or are we starting with a new number that would have to be added on today?
It would have to be added on. It is not included in this budget material I'm getting ready to go over with you.
Okay, so
basically, we since it came in, I wanted y'all to be aware of the request.
Great, thanks.
All right. So let me move ahead then to the biggest section of this meeting, the general fund discussion, starting with the departmental requests. And we have a slide here for each department, but as an overview, as it says here, when we last met, there was a $19 million deficit, and that included all the requests considered: mandatory, life safety, and high priority. And our budget and finance folks and others went through all the additional requests, and they kind of reprioritized the high priority ones, the medium priority ones. And then we have a slide here for every department that kind of summarizes where we are with each department request. Starting with budget, finance, and revenue, they had a request. This is an example, and then each department will follow. They had a general fund base budget request of $8,716,814, as you can see, with additional requests for next year of $87,101. So after culling those down, the budget recommendation is to approved 53,700 of the 87, which brings their total draft budget to 8,770,000. So, and the biggest requested increase is to restore the professional services contract for the performance assessments back to where it was pre-COVID. So that was $50,000 difference there.
Hey, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
how much have we given Novak so far?
I don't have that number on the top of my head, and I don't know if Matt or Kathy do. If not, we'll get that number to you. I can't see everybody on my screen right now.
What do we have appropriate for them? $1 million?
Not nearly that, no, sir.
No, I'm talking about total.
Yeah, it's, I'd have to, Matt, do you have that number or you want to get it to us later?
Yeah, we'll work on getting it there. We don't have it in front of us, but we get it.
And then as a follow-up, what are we getting from them?
I'd be glad. We've been trying to set up a time for council to get an update from them. They've been working on a number of things, including setting up our Bridge Academy that we just had our successful second class, building resilient, innovative, data-driven government employees. It was modeled after the Peak Academy in Denver, and we've been involved, and we believe after we do it for a little while, we'll be able to do it ourselves. But the Novak folks help us set it up and actually help run the classes. So that's just one thing. They've continued to look at 2 or 3 major departments or processes each year over the last few years as well, which have led to improvement. So I'd be happy to schedule for them to come to council and give a full report on all their more recent activities.
Okay. If we can, it would be great to see some type of cost benefit analysis regarding their recommendations.
Understood.
Thank
Yep.
you.
Yep. Oh, I think I can change the slide here as well. Oh, good. Excuse me, I'm figuring this out. So, so this continues budget finance for the enterprise funds. Angel Oak, we're recommending their increase for next year. Our traffic has increased greatly out there, and there's another slide on that later on. So what you're going to see on a number of these slides, though, is the fact that budget finance has identified a number of departmental requests that we can use our ARPA funds to help cover those expenses. I think the total is to about 4,700,000, but it cuts into that deficit we were talking about. So anyway, this is the first example of that. Apparently 23,000 in ARPA funds could be used for some of these requests for the Angel Oak budget. I'm just going to keep moving if y'all don't mind. Just holler if you want to stop or ask a question. Continuing within enterprise funds, you get the city market-based budget, and they requested an additional 21,000. The Old Slave Mart Museum had no additional requests. Clerk of Council had a $57,000 additional request, and recommended we keep 51 of that. There was for additional person with records management. They're saying this position is necessary. The executive budget, which includes, by the way, the municipal court, the mayor's office, the corporation council, the Office of Children, Youth and Family, Cultural Affairs, and Public Information. So all that gets included. We had additional requests of 850, with 670 of that being recommended by budget finance, and that 560,000 of ARPA funds could be used to fund the water plan that has been recommended by our recently by our 3x3 advisory committee, and for new cubicles for the municipal court. Apparently they were put in like 25 years ago when the building was built, and they're somewhat shot and need to be replaced. So those were the main additional requests in the executive budget.
Mayor, two questions. This is Dudley.
Mhm.
On the executive budget, anything for the equity and inclusion manager would fall under this as well?
I believe it would be. Yeah.
Okay.
And there was some money in there. I don't know the exact amount, but Matt and them can check and let us know.
Yeah, there were a couple of requests, yes. Not a lot, but they were there.
Yeah.
And there is some funding, Mayor, on $80,000, and it's being funded through the ARPA.
Right, and that's from last year that hasn't been expended, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The next question, Mayor, is the previous slide in terms of the slave museum, not the clerk. Yes, right.
Right.
What's going to happen there once the IM is open?
I think we're going to continue to operate as we currently do. I mean, they might assess, I think at some point we need to assess our displays and what's presented there, but for a good part, I believe it's not, it'll be a little bit of duplication, but the Old Slave Mart Museum is so focused just on that topic and being in the place where slaves were quartered and sold that, and the International African American Museum will cover such a wider spectrum of topics that I think we keep the museum going, maybe tweak the displays a little bit.
Okay, because the entire city is the museum, really. I agree with you. The IM is a building, but it goes beyond those walls, which would be inclusive of the Old Slave Mart.
That's right.
Okay.
So that brings us to the fire department. They had a base of 41 million, a request for 6.7 million. We considered 1.7 of that to be mandatory life safety. So of the balance, I think we're recommending 1.4 million. And then of all the things requested, we're recommending that $1.5 million be used from ARPA funds for the one-time expenditures. So we net all that down in the department budget, we'll end up at 42.6. Housing and community development, they had $1.1 million in additional requests. We're only recommending 332, so that brings their budget to $1.5 million. And this is that age-old issue. We try to deal with it every year, it seems to me, and we always seem to have a challenging budget and never can move all those positions to the general fund that we've been using grant funds for those positions. But
and Mayor, in that regard, when are we going to finally do that? Because those dollars that they're using from grant money could be going other places.
Yep.
I understand.
Why? I mean, we've been at this now for 5 years, maybe or more.
That's right.
And I just don't understand why we can't budget through the general fund, permanent staffing for this department. I don't understand what the holdup continues to be.
But we just find ourselves in the same crack every year where if you move it all over, you're gonna have to raise taxes to cover it. And, that's a decision for council to make.
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Jackson has her hand up.
Oh, thanks. You said the words, Mayor. I was just going to remind Councilmember Gregory, it's all about sources of revenue that qualify for general funding. And, this is splitting off a little chunk of the baby, moving it back into the general fund. I do think we do need to make those bigger decisions holistically.
I want to disagree with you, but what I'm saying is it does not appear to be a priority. We've been working on this for almost 5 years. And so we're still using grant money, okay, for staffing, which could be used to help the affordability gap. That's
No
all.
question.
Okay.
Yeah.
It baffles me because I thought by now we would have completed this. But move on.
Councilmember Shade has his hand up.
Councilmember Shade?
I'm sorry, but I got distracted. Would you mind going back to the fire department budget one more time?
Back to what?
The fire department.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Well, let's just finish. Was there any more question about that? Okay. I hear you, Councilmember Gregory. All right, fire department.
So what is the mandatory life safety that we're reducing by $300,000?
No, we're not doing that, Councilman. We're funding the mandatory life safety at 1.7 and then reducing the 6.7 to 1.4.
Okay, I just want to make sure thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. Or another way to look at it, the 6.7 is all their requests. So then the 1.7 comes off of the 6.7. We're funding the mandatory life safety items. That would leave about 5 million of their additional requests, of which we're funding 1.4. I think that's the way it works.
Okay, thank you. That clarifies it. Now, can we go back to the next slide that we just left? Because I didn't want to get, and Councilmember Gregory has a wonderful point about this. Do we know how much of our salary is being funded by grant money only?
It's apparently 3, I think it's 3 positions.
But what does that dollar amount come out to be?
Mayor, it's 4 positions currently remaining.
4? And do you know about how much money that is ballpark for those positions with benefits and all?
For you. We'll get that number for you before we're done.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
And
So-
over 5 years, how much is that? And then there's a broader question that we need to be responsive to, and that is the limits on the caps on administrative cost. We don't want to put this division, okay, in a position where they're are going over the administrative cap provision. So I think we have to be very, very careful here in terms of how we deal with these grant programs for this department.
Well, I know Gianna is very attentive to those kinds of things and wouldn't let us get into trouble on that. And in the meantime, with all respectfully, we've added a lot of funding for affordable housing from other places that don't show up in our general fund. So I guess you look at the bigger picture of the whole pie of funding that we've dedicated, and it's been substantially more, even though we're still funding these few positions with this grant money. That being said, I mean, if the will of council is to is to move that and add to the deficit and then raise taxes to cover it, then, you know, that's a decision we can make.
I mean, if that's the only alternative, everything goes back to raising taxes. But if you take those 4 positions and just multiply them by something as simple as 50,000 each over 5 years, that's a lot of money.
It adds up. There's no question about it.
Okay.
Gotcha. Okay, HR, they had a very minimal request, and I guess we only recommended a portion of it. Okay, get back to our quarterly breakfasts for our customer service initiative, I bet. Information technology, we're funding about $500,000 of the 2.1 in additional request was considered mandatory or life safety. And so we're recommending $1.4 million of their requests. So that brings their budget up, but we're saying that we could use almost $900,000 of ARPA funds to cover some of those one-time requests and some additional hospitality funds. And most of this was software and other equipment for the police department, police camera replacements, and so forth. Livability and tourism, it's pretty, not much of an increase, $12,000, and we're recommending that. That was to restore some overtime. Parks, again, we got a $2.2 million request for increase, and we're recommending about half of that. And then we're taking some things out of their budget and saying that we can fund them through a maintenance reserve account to the tune of $910,000 and some additional ARPA funds. And these are things that are one-time expenses that qualify and are appropriate for the maintenance reserve, HVAC systems, some restrooms, some improvements to fire stations 18 and 19, the Herbert Hazel Pool. So various one-time expenditures would also come from ARPA funds. So again, just being very creative, our team is coming up with ways to pay for the things that are being requested and trying not to use all general funds in order to do it.
And Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Shade has his hand.
Councilmember Shade?
Thank you. And I know, Mayor, that we've had several discussions. I know there's some plans in the works with the W.L. Stevens pool.
Yeah.
So is anything with this budget dealing with the temporary repairs or anything we need to be doing with W.L. Stevens? Or we pretty much kind of shell temporary fix-ups with that pool?
Well, this budget would include, you know, keeping the pool operating and kind of normal expenditures related to that, but it would not include like a major set aside for a pool replacement, if that's where you're going.
Well, I know that we've had these discussions about, and I know there's been some plans rolling on the pool replacement, but there was also very severe issues dealing with the roof and the HVAC, and there were the periods of times in which the pool was not being usable at all.
Well, we pretty much dealt with that this year. And I mean, the net result is it's not a year-round pool anymore. It's a seasonal pool.
Right.
But we took care of those extra expenses to at least make that possible and reopen it as a seasonal pool in this year's budget. Right, Matt?
Yes, sir. We had used some general fund reserves to cover that.
Yeah, and that's what I meant, but we've sort of abandoned, I just want to make sure that I'm on the same page with everybody else on it. We've abandoned the idea of making this a full 12-month usable pool because of some of those issues. I mean, some of the problems are they're just so expensive. We're getting to the point of replacing it is going to be much more of a better steward use of our funds on.
That's
on that.
right.
Okay,
We'd be better off setting aside the funds for the pool replacement
okay. I
rather
mean,
than trying to put it back into service as a year-round pool, because of its size, its age, its, just a number of factors. If you go out there and look around, it's pretty apparent.
yeah, I'm very much familiar with the condition of the pool. So I'm just making sure we're clear that we're not using any additional funds beyond just sort of maintaining the status quo with that pool.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, move on to some enterprise funds, the baseball park requested 119. We're not recommending much of that. We have some other issues with the baseball park that we'll need to talk about separately at another time. There are upgrades that they're saying are required to meet the new Major League Baseball specifications, but that is not in this year's budget. And we may get to that when we get to accommodations or another budget, or maybe next year.
We haven't gotten the full request from them yet, Mayor.
We haven't gotten a full request yet.
We met with them and they were gonna go back and come back and come up with another sort of proposal for.
Okay. Well, I just let the ad hoc committee know it's coming. It's coming. And
Well, we got our shirts. What more do we want, Mayor?
I mean, they won the division title, right? And the Braves won too. So, baseball's been very, very good.
Yeah.
But
We want them to be self-sustaining. That's what we want.
that's
Yeah.
what we want. And
Exactly.
we're going to, we want to add a fee for long-term maintenance. Again, we're not on that today, but I just know it's coming because the Major League Baseball requirements do call for some upgrades to our facilities. Okay, planning, preservation, you can see the base budget there, 3.1, and they had big requests. A lot of that was for the new zoning ordinance that we're going to start working on and new downtown plan. So we're recommending that 850 of that come from ARPA funds. And so at the end of the day, we're just funding those two things out of their additional requests. It would be apparent to me.
Mr. Mayor, what about the water plan? Is that somewhere else?
That was in the executive budget.
That's right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, police, we were at 55 million. They requested an extra 3.1. We're recommending 686 of that, and 50,000 of that can come from ARPA. So, and the main increases were simply to restore most of the increases from all the department in a general sense were just to restore funding pre-COVID. Isn't that a basically true statement, Matt?
Yes, sir, it is.
Yeah. So, and this was another example of that. So I'm just going to keep moving unless y'all have a question. The Public Service Department, similarly, an $18 million budget, requested almost $1 million in additional funding, and we're recommending almost 400 of that. 136 can come out of ARPA funds, so we end up just increasing it from 18.6 to 18.8. And again, the majority of increases were just to get us back to pre-pandemic levels, but we could, we do want to do a garbage cart audit, and that will help us manage that whole program better going forward.
But those are ARPA funds, Mayor. Right?
Right,
Those
Well-
two one-time things.
that's right. The recreation budget, it looks like, most of their additional requests we're including in a small section we can use from ARPA funds, just $10,000. So that takes them from 9.2 to 9.4. And continuing the municipal golf course, they have we're recommending 294 of their 375. And most of that, if not all of it, is covered by increase in fees that we're charging for greens fees and all.
And increased attendance, increased use.
What's that?
I'm saying, and increased numbers, so they have a lot more players that are paying the fees.
Yeah, we're up nicely on the revenue side. Most municipal golf courses lose money. I think we're at the point we're actually about breaking even. TNT, similar numbers. They requested almost 800, 900 extra. We're recommending 210, and 87 of that can come from ARPA. Trying to restore to pre-pandemic levels. And we can use the 87 in ARPA funds for some equipment.
Mr. Mayor, could we take a little pause here, knowing that Mr. Somerville was promoted to be the overall director, but he was assistant director, or whatever his actual title was. How is that money being redeployed to replace the leadership staff for TNT?
Well, that position will be filled at some point.
Okay.
In the meantime, we have our line item of savings from positions that aren't filled 100% of the time, employee savings. In fact, you'll see in just a few minutes, we're going to up that number from the savings that we get substantially for next year, which we think is justified. But that just falls into that when you have a position that's not occupied for a little while.
Okay, so there will be a number 2 associate director, whatever.
No, we hadn't planned to change that. We'll
Great.
Hire an assistant for Robbie at some point.
Good.
The parking fund, similar kind of thing. So their budget number goes up from 24 million to 24.3. A little bit of ARPA funds to buy some equipment. I must admit, I'm reading this one for the first time. Restore overtime. Another vehicle. We're adding a barnacle car immobilizers to replace our boots. I don't know if y'all have seen a barnacle yet, but it sucks down on your windshield so you can't see and disables the use of the vehicle, and it's easy to remove. So anyway, it's a latest technology, I guess, and
It sounds like something my grandson would love.
demobilizing the car. Councilmember Shade?
I know this is not about expenditures, but have our revenue increased significantly over the past 6 months or so from our parking, from our garages?
They've increased. I think we get the revenue in just a little bit.
Yeah, I think about while we're here, as we're budgeting this thing, is that showing up pretty steadily? Or we can wait till we get to the income part of it, either way.
That's okay. Matt, you want to address that?
So we are seeing revenues and parking increase as they kind of would based on the time of the year and the tourism impacts, especially as it hits transient, related to transient parking in garages. We are still not back to pre-pandemic levels, but we are seeing an increase that lets us know we're getting there, essentially. Yes, correct.
Yeah. So this is more of a summary of where we stand, and at the last meeting, and that included the $19 million deficit, included our employee increase, a cost of living increase, and getting our minimum wage up. Isn't that right, Matt? When we had
Yes, sir.
the deficit of 19 million. So these are the major adjustments. Speaking of which, we increased our budget for parking revenue up by almost $1.5 million. We increased our revenue projection for building inspection revenues, 400,000. We've been raising fees there. We increased T&T revenues because we added some fees there. That's 100,000. We increased our business license revenues by 200,000. That's, of course, a projection, but based on how this year is done better than what we had projected, we think that's very reasonable. Similar, not similar, but we have an increase in tourism funds transfers, and I think that's from an expectation that our accommodations and hospitality funds are going to do better than what we were thinking just until recently. Well, we increased our projection for franchise fees revenue. This was the thing I mentioned a minute ago, that we doubled our salary savings to 6 million. It was 3 million before, so that's in essence a savings of $3 million, and some of that projection is based on the conversations we've had about filling positions and our turnover rate, frankly, but it does turn out to be savings to us. And then all through these department summaries, I've been mentioning the Arpa Fund. So total, we would recommend using about 4.7 million of Arpa funds to cover some of these departmental budgets. And so in effect, that makes a savings, and then some other adjustments of a mere 210,000. So we have a new shortfall. Rather than 19 million, we're only $8 million short.
Hallelujah.
So we're getting there. So that's a more detail on it. 8,454,000, I guess, to be exact. Any questions about any of that?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
So
ma'am.
looking at the salary savings that we're, unfortunately, I think, confident that it could go as high as 6 million of unfilled positions. Are we eliminating any of those positions? Are we, like rethinking efficiencies for positions? Because for every unspent position salary dollar, we have employees that are trying to make up for the work. So I really think that we should continue to hold that thought, in the very front of our minds, that we can't just say, oh, goody, we get to save $6 million. We have to say, we have $6 million worth of salaries for positions that are not helping out the city's needs, unless we've figured out ways that some of those positions have now been, subsumed by other efficiencies or other cross-cutting ventures that we have with private-public entities or things like that. So I know that's not a mainstream budget topic, but certainly I would appreciate maybe having the Human Resources Committee take that up, and maybe with some of the other departments where the position vacancies are as dire as we were told a couple of weeks ago, because I do think that that's something that we need to really be responsible to look into the future, and how are we going to be positioning people to work well in our city.
Right. Well, I know we've been talking about this a little while, or a bit lately, I should say. And most of these positions that are open we want to keep in the budget because they're mostly frontline workers that we just haven't found the applications to fill them. I must say, I was a little uplifted that my meeting with Matt and Tom O'Brien the other day, that they had 12 different positions in public service that they actually recently got decent applicants, and they're moving them on through the system. That there were a few truck drivers and other workers. So for whatever reason, it seems like just in the last couple of weeks, we've started finding some folks. But for the most part, these are not positions that are considered excess that we want to get rid of. We want to hold them open. And honestly, this is a line item that I think we've been pretty conservative on in prior years in our budgeting, that we actually save a good bit more than $3 million every year as a general rule. And it ends up helping us, I guess, when we balance the books. But just given circumstances what they are right now, we think it's prudent and reasonable to say in 2022 that we'll have $6 million worth of salary savings. Matt, did I say anything wrong there?
No, Mayor, I think that was a very good explanation.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
question. Okay. All right, we have a deficit of 8 million or more, 8.5 million.
Right.
How do we pay for it without raising taxes?
You'd have to cut stuff. I mean, you'd have to start cutting stuff out of the budget.
Have we done that exercise?
I feel we have, council member, by the nature of this whole process where, in fact, every department is asking for more money than we're recommending to you. So that included the scrutiny, almost like a zero-based process where you look at all the expenditures of the department and recommend those that we feel are appropriate to keep.
Not quite zero-based budgeting, but it's close.
Yeah.
And Mayor, I think in the next few slides, you'll see how maybe we can, some options for closing the gap a little bit more.
Yeah. So, exactly. You could further reduce expenditures. Here's the answer to that question. You could not fund any high priority items, but that would include things like restoring the overtime that was removed, or adding any new positions. And the ones that we're adding, I think are very, been scrutinized and I think are more than reasonable to proceed with. For example, we really feel like we need another outreach person to help Talia with the homeless in our community and helping move them to a better place. There's I guess, tell me about this, Matt. Including 2 housing and community development grant funded positions we agreed to fund in the 2022. We talked about that before. Am I?
Yes, Mayor, and those right now are included in the high priority. So if we choose not to do the high priority, those positions would stay as grant funded and not move into the general fund that we were talking about previously. We just want to make sure everyone was aware of that. We know those are big things for everyone.
So that would be the 330,000 that the Councilmember Gregory was discussing.
So in fact, we are moving 2 over this year.
That's what we were under the high priority. Yes, sir.
Okay. So I guess, council member, that's an answer to the earlier question of making some progress. And that leaves how many grant funded positions that we haven't moved yet? Do you know?
4.
2. If we had 4 in Well, if we move these two, it would leave two remaining.
It'd be 2 remaining?
Yes, sir, if we did these two in 2022.
Okay, so we're halfway there. All
If
right,
we fund the high priorities.
if we fund the high priorities. Um,
And Mayor, just so that we clear, when we say high priorities, we're talking about the top 2, the top 3, the top 1. What are we talking?
Well, it was a process where Budget Finance looked at all of the additional requests, and as I said when we started, they separated what they deemed to be high priorities and medium priorities. They did it with the consult of the department heads. Isn't that right, Matt?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. So the exercise with prioritizing only guided what the priorities would eventually be?
Yes, by department. When each department submitted their
Yes.
request, they numbered them. And we didn't, it can be based on what their needs were, whether or not, high priority could actually turn into a life safety, which immediately pulled out, it left a certain number of things. And it's just a matter of, sometimes it's a dollar amount, sometimes it's, how many things. I don't want to say that we did 1, 2, and 3 for everybody, because 1 for somebody could have been $100,000, where 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, and 6 could have been $100,000 for somebody else. It just kind of varied. We looked at what we viewed, and having conversations with the department, what they thought their highest priorities be, just outside of life safety, that we really need to have or want to have to function in this next year as best as we possibly can.
So the bottom line, if you didn't fund your high priority items for next year, you'd save $4.5 million, and we'd still have a deficit of 3.8. This was just an option, an example.
No, I understand. And to be more specific, the making of Cummings Street two-way, while that wasn't of the highest priority, I did see that somewhere. Did that go off the list now?
It was a department request, but it did not fall under their high priority category.
Okay, so it won't be funded.
It would not be correct.
Okay, I just need to know, because, they've been waiting for that for a while as well.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just want to be clear. I don't want to go out and give misinformation.
Right.
Okay.
So this looks like a summary here. And I must apologize. I'm looking at it for the first time myself.
Yeah, Mary, you're no Amy.
He does speak a lot slower than Amy does, doesn't he?
Yes, he does.
So it looks like, Mayor, if we increase the minimum wage and the cost of living increase, that's almost a $7 million add-on, and that budget then is out of whack by 9.7 million.
Yeah, and then you add the enterprise funds transfers in. So this correlates to the previous slide where it says, if you cut these high priority items, you'd end up with a deficit of 3.8 million. So you see that at the bottom right-hand side,
Right.
the 3 point. So this is how we would look if you did this example of cutting the high priority items. So let's
But is that also then including the increase in the minimum wage and cost of living?
that's keeping the 6.9 million in there.
Right.
Yeah. So another way to further reduce expenditures would be to look at that 6.9 million. And, we've talked about this before, that the 6.9 million adds a dollar next year. And there's a couple of different options where we could spread that out a little more evenly, or even next year do 50 cent for half of the year and another 50 cent starting July 1. So the little different options of that could save us another 1.9 million in one case, or up to 2.6 million if you did this even spread of 67 cents a year for 3 years. So again, we get back to that discussion about the main difference is how quickly we raise our minimum. Do we bump it $1 right away, or do we do it 67 cents a year, or do we do it 50-50-50 or $1.50-50?
Mayor, I think that our staff is our greatest asset as a city, and that at some point we've got to show them, okay, that we in fact think that they are. And I just think extending it out sends the wrong message. And somehow we need to figure out how to get folks to $15 minimum wage, which will also kick up some of the other salaries, won't it?
Yeah, there's adjustment to avoid what they call compression. And then there's also a cost of living increase included in that 6.9 million. And I'll point out to you, that's why we've left it in there. We've kept it in there all along. And even with the 6.9 million, we're still working it in over the next 3 years, but we're doing a whole dollar extra in 2022, up to $14, which makes some progress. Don't forget, when I got elected, we were at $8.50, and we've gone from $8.50 to $13 over the last 5 years. So we're definitely been trying. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Gregory. I totally agree. I think if not when, then we need to do something exemplary coming out of COVID. We're already saying that we're going to be able to, hopefully budget more from revenue. When we have more revenue, we have more staff, intense use of staff. So I think this is the year to make the statement with our money, limited though it is, to the staff, that they are our biggest valuable asset, and we do not want to lose them. We want to increase their number and multiply their capabilities. So I would definitely vote for the graduated plan.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
And Mr. Mayor, this is not taken into consideration any other salary increases. We've had discussions about, in particular, our top level. Well, actually, from A to Z level, I would suspect, increasing people's salaries from every angle. I mean, we've had this discussion about we losing folks, particularly in the stormwater department. I think the engineers has been an issue because our wages, our salary is not up to par with neighboring municipalities in Charleston County. So this increase that we're talking about is not addressing that at all. This is just addressing the minimum wage increase.
And the cost of living.
And the cost of living increase. I understand that, but there's also this other issue of staffing that we've got to take a hard look at as to increasing. We've heard this loud cry from several of our directors that they're losing people because we're not competitive enough.
Yeah. So we have had to look, Councilmember Shade, at some one-off positions like engineering and stormwater review, and have been making some adjustments as allowed with the flexibility we have in our budget. Just from an administration point of view, we've made some adjustments on those positions.
And Mayor, just to follow up to Councilman Shade, he's absolutely correct. I mean, in addition to the minimum wage, if we want to be the kind of city that we need to be in order for us to attract and to maintain, okay, and to maintain the talent that we have, we are going to have to address that issue. And we're going to have to address the issue very soon because people are leaving, okay, at upper levels in the city already. I mean, some of it's normal attrition, but folks are going to higher and better paying opportunities. And we've got to be pretty cognizant of that. And I think as Councilman Shade says, we've got to really start considering that. We're not going to maintain the talent that we currently have because most of those people can leave right now and make much more money. And the only reason they're here, most of them, is because of their commitment and dedication to the city.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why you do your job, and there's no question our dedicated city employees are public servants. I mean, they're in this because they enjoy the work and enjoy serving our citizens. So that's why we have this adjustment, y'all. We're trying to address that in a reasonable fashion. Adding $6.9 million, if we stick with the graduated plan, is the most we've done that I can recall since I've been mayor. Isn't that right, Matt? Have we had a COLA and adjustment to our pay grades of this level in the last 6 years? I don't think so.
What's that percentage for the COLA?
I'm not sure what it is. People know what it is.
It's on a, so the tool is a straight percentage.
Feds is 5.9.
Yeah, it's not a straight percentage, Councilmember Dudley, or Councilmember Gregory, excuse me. We can give you a breakdown of how exactly the COLA plays out into the calculations on the pay plan.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, well, let's keep moving if we can. It's too late to have fee increases for next year, but just to let you know, we've been doing that last few years. We raised the building inspection permits and fees, the TRC fees. We raised the fees at the golf course. We added the public right-of-way traffic and transportation fees. So these things don't happen quickly, but we continue to look at those, and some of the additional revenue that we have for next year is in fact a result of the fees that we've put into place. Councilmember Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the it was a worthy of thought questions and ideas that I generated as I was reconnecting with voters over the last month or two. That like we don't charge parking around our sports fields, and there's probably a lot of other places where we could add some sort of fee that, people come from all over to use our soccer fields and baseball fields for regional play. So I don't know if that's ever been, I know it was mentioned in the master plan, but I don't know if we've seriously considered starting to have some sort of fee-based parking that's not on the peninsula.
Gotcha. I can't answer that question. We'd have to get back to you, but I mean, we got that whole issue of the Parks Rec Master Plan, and excuse me for not knowing, but Matt, Andrew, Kathy, do y'all know if the enterprise manager position got recommended in the recreation budget?
I saw
Yes.
it. It is.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It is.
So that person is supposed to start looking at all those kinds of things.
Great. Put it
Yeah.
on the list, please.
So that brings us back once again to property taxes. I don't have it to show you, like I like to do sometimes, it's somewhere in my briefcase. I got my property tax bill the other day, y'all, and my assessment had not changed. You know, it was the same as the year before. And my property tax was $58 less than what it was last year. I saved money this year on my property taxes. And so it caused me here at the 11th hour to ask if we should again consider using a portion of our local option sales tax credit, which we are legally allowed to do by the state of South Carolina. It is a bona fide way that municipalities fund themselves. The town of Mount Pleasant does it, the city of North Charleston does it, the city of Columbia does it. And it seems to me I know we asked ourselves this question last year. I just got to ask it again. Doesn't it make sense to use every available legal means we have of getting resources and money to pay for all these things that we are looking to do, including taking care of our employees? So the way it works is you got to have an ordinance passed before you can use it in your budget for next year. So on the agenda you're getting this evening will include the consideration of an ordinance that will allow us to use the local option sales tax for part of our revenue stream for next year. If it doesn't pass Tuesday, then it won't be an option. But I think it's a valid thing for us to consider. I know some council members consider it a backdoor tax increase. It would allow us to not have a millage increase if we used local option sales tax. It's legal, it's provided by state law. So I think it's something that we should consider. I don't know that you want to have a discussion about it right now. Maybe Tuesday is appropriate. I just wanted to bring that back up. And this next slide shows you if we use 25% of what we are allowed, it would generate 2.8 million. If we use half of what we are allowed, it would generate 5.9 million. And if we use all of what we're allowed, it would generate 8.8 million, which conveniently would take care of this shortfall for next year. But I don't know that I'd recommend, it all coming from here. But I personally, I think it's reasonable for the city to start using it. And it would just mean, for example, that my tax bill this year, rather than going down $50, might have stayed the same. And in essence, by never using any of this LOST, we have a creeping tax reduction that our citizens benefit from, just like I saw in my tax bill. So I invite y'all to, if you got the notice from the county recently, to pull out your tax bill that you got a week or two ago and compare it to last year and see what it looks like on your end. But anyway, this is a possibility to kind of balance that shortfall. And then we're back to millage. 1 mill this year would generate $1.7 million, and you just do the math. 2 mills would generate 3.4, and 3 mills would generate 5.1 million. So you can do some combination of reducing the high priority requests. Maybe there's still some other projects in parks or IT that are available for some more maintenance reserve funds. Matt, do you have any insight on this slide?
No, sir, it's just really just looking at what the difference would be, should you choose to use, you can include the high priority requests, and then offset those one-time ones with ARPA, and that's essentially the net increase that the budget would see. We also have some things in parks and IT that are eligible through the maintenance reserve funds. That's the $1 million that we set aside through general fund reserves right off the top. And then some additional tourist funds. You know, that ultimately ends up to having a net increase of $30,000. It's minimal, essentially is what it boils down to, Mayor.
Yeah, okay. Councilmember Jackson?
Thank you. Well, I was going to ask, and then I have a question about this slide too. So remind us again, Matt, what is the maximum number of the millage increase that we would be allowed? Not that we're considering that, but just as a number. How many mills?
3.4.
3.4 mils is our max. Okay. And then the one-time expenditures. So are we talking about this as the second round of ARPA funds that we'll get in June?
That's
Correct.
correct.
Okay, thank you.
So I'm not, any insight on this one, Matt, for me? This is just a summary of, in numbers of this verbiage here, correct?
Yes, sir, that's right. It's just summarizing that if we use the ARPA funds and other funds like the reserve funds and additional hospitality funds, it
Yeah.
brings the deficit from 3.8 million to 4.1 million.
Gotcha. So the summary here is back to that current shortfall of 8.4 million. You could strike some of the high priority items or all of them. You could fund those high priority items with some other ARPA funds, which would basically use up almost all of our ARPA funds and some more reserves and hospitality. You could, stretch the dollar increase next year into two increments, 50 cents on January 1 and 50 cents on July 1, and save almost 2 million. Or you could do that 3-year option where it's spread out evenly and save 2.6 million next year. So that's on the expenditure side. On the revenue side, we could use some of the LOST funds, as I explained. I don't think I'd recommend going over the 50%, which would be 5.9 million. And then you could do a millage increase. But I think my thinking is if you did the 50% of the LOST, which is almost 6 million, right? And you did the minimum wage in 2 increments next year, that's 8 million. Shoot, we're within a rounding error at that point.
Can you say that again, Mayor? You said the incremental, so you'd pick number 50 cent every 6 months, and that would be the 1.9 savings? Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. You'd
Okay.
still be given, by the end of by July, you'd still be given $1 $1 an hour increase to
Right.
our lower paid workers. But that would save you almost $2 million. If you started using the LOST at 50%, that adds 6 million in revenue. So you're about 8 million of the current deficit of 8.4. You might have to look at those high priority items and pull out, $450,000 of high priority items, and that would get us balanced.
Or we could use ARPA funds.
Or you could use ARPA funds, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
that's
What is the
Thanks.
disadvantage of using the max amount of ARPA funds this year?
Well, you know, they were provided to us by the federal government for certain purposes. You know, we used the first round already. We got a second round coming next year. Just, do you want to hold on to some of that for some flexible spending for next year as further needs present themselves? I don't know.
If you took, by using the ARPA funds, it's 4.2 million in savings. So you close to another $4 million deficits, which you're looking at, right?
Correct.
If you did nothing else, and then if you added another 2 million by doing the minimum wage increase at 50 cents every 6 months, so now you're down to another $2 million, right? Deficit. That's pretty close.
That's pretty close.
That's pretty close.
You could use 25% of the LOST at that point and you'd be done.
Well, I know you have been proponent of that, Mayor, and I'm not there. But if you have a $2 million deficit by doing those two things, what's the downfall of using another 2 million from ARPA?
Well, it's a combination of ARPA and some other reserves. I think that maintenance reserves and other reserves. I don't know that there's any particular downfall, although when you get to next May and we actually get the cash in hand, you know, you've already dedicated it at that point. Matt?
So Councilmember Shade, I think what I would point out with those high priority items that we've identified to use ARPA funding for, they're one-time expenses. And we're using a one-time ARPA fund to pay those. And I think the scenario you're talking about is throwing another $2 million worth of ARPA funding in to balance the budget. The problem is you're using one-time revenue for, at that point, ongoing expenses.
So what you do is you take away another $2 million that you may want to be using for actually restoration of lost revenue in next year's budget, in the 2023 budget.
Yeah, I think you have two issues. One, I mean, it's general sound financial policy not to use a one-time revenue for an ongoing expense, because at some point you're going to have to reconcile that issue.
Right. I got you. And that makes sense. I mean, that's a sound advice that you've given us, Matt. But it is an option, and we're talking about $2 million out of a. So what is our total budget?
So Peter, this next slide I hadn't gotten to. It's just it's just what you said of using those extra ARPA reserve hospitality funds, and then the 50-50 on the increase next year, and that brings us down to a deficit of 2.2 million.
Right.
So that gets you pretty close, but you'd still have to decide, are you going to do that with $1.5 million increase, or cut something else, or use the LOST?
Right.
I think
And
basically.
if we don't use the millage or the loss, we're gonna have to find it from somewhere else.
Then you'd have to just go back through it all and cut out another 2.2 million.
Well, that's if we go with not doing the ARP reserve hospitality funds, correct?
Right.
Right.
Okay. And we'd have to go with the 50 cents, then the 67 cents or whatever that is for the increases, wage increases.
50-50 in next year. We still to get $1 done next year, but we're just breaking it up in two.
Yeah, I understand it, but that is a 50 cents an hour for six.
Right.
You know, that's still
Yeah.
substantial. I mean,
Yep.
in terms of them not getting what I think they should be getting.
Right. Hey, Matt, do you know how much of that 4.288 is ARPA and how much is reserve and hospitality funds?
They're crunching, Mayor.
Yeah, no, they're looking.
Just 1 second, we can pull up the spreadsheet right now and tell you that.
Fine.
Yeah. So while they're looking that up, our next meeting, we're going to go over our tourism budgets and our stormwater budget. And I guess we'll finalize this budget as well. And then have a workshop with the full council on November 16th. And after that workshop, we'll advertise the budget and have a full draft to council on the 23rd with, so you can review it by first reading in December and second and third reading, the second meeting of December.
Mayor, if I had my druthers, I would leave the increase alone in minimum wage, and
Yeah.
I'd leave the priorities alone, okay, and still try not to do a tax increase.
How do you do that?
I don't know. That's why we have. That's why we have folks looking at these numbers. I don't know. I just don't want a tax increase, okay, to come off as though we're using the coffers as a piggy bank. I'm just not that comfortable with that, because there is going to come a time at some point where we're really, really going to have to go at some cash. That might require tax increases down the line. I don't know. Just got to convince me, guys, on this one.
So Mayor, what does our total budget look like? At the end of the day, what is our total? We're talking about 4 million, 8 million, $6 million that we're dealing here.
A $200-something million budget, right?
Right. I mean, so what is that 200-something million budget? What's that number?
30 something.
Matt, do you know what it is?
So we're just shy of 250 million in total.
250?
Yes, sir. And to answer the question about the breakdown on those one-time expenses, ARPA is covering about 2.8, and the other tourism funds are covering about 1.4.
Mm-hmm. But
both of which can we increase?
Mm-hmm.
But that ARPA was in addition to the ARPA that we had already been talking about all through the presentation, right?
No, that is the ARPA that we identified in each department. Those were the expenses we identified that one-time expenses that we believe would be valid ARPA reimbursed or covered expenses.
Okay.
Right. So as you made your recommendations, then you deducted any eligible ARPA expenses from that. And that's where you got to the net for each department.
Correct.
Right.
And the one time is the Arpa funds, right? Because we could continue to use the hospitality funds.
We can, as long as they are based on what tourism, hospitality, or accommodations it is, as long as they're eligible under the law, that's where the transfer comes in from the tourism funds to cover those things in the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
So they might not necessarily be one-time expenses, but we do fund them through tourism, hospitality, but we've identified some additional things that we probably can do.
Okay. No.
So you're going to send us this whole slide set, Mr. Mayor,
We can.
please. I'll be sleeping on my pillow that under there.
I'm not.
Mayor, if you don't mind, I have Councilmember Gregory's two other questions. I have his answer as well on the Novak in the positions in housing and community development. So since 2016, 2017, when we engaged Novak, we have spent just shy of $980,000. And the 4 positions in housing and community development that are covered through the grants, full personnel costs, salary and fringes is $327,000 per year.
Okay, that's considerable. It would be great if we had that 900,000 from Novak. What else we owe Novak?
How much was Novak last year, Matt? Do you know?
Much.
And we cut it last.
We cut it last year.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we cut 50,000 last year, and that was a request to put back with BFRC was that. And if I remember correctly, that may finish out the contract.
Okay.
It did say on your slide, will be rebid. You said rebid.
Because the total contract was close to $1 million, right? Am I correct?
I believe you're right. We're right around there right now, Councilmember.
Okay. Thank you.
Over 4 or 5 years.
Right.
Okay. Okie dokie. What else?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
Matt, what was the budget for 21, the total budget for 21?
I believe it was around 230, but we'll get you that exact number in just a second.
Okay, and you're saying that
I'm aware, and I didn't see you until just now. Have you been with us all this time?
not all the time, no. I kind of came on, I've been on for a while you were talking about this portion, but
Yeah,
not the whole meeting.
I'm sorry, I would have welcomed
Oh, that's
you.
okay. I was just listening. That's okay.
With the screens on my computer here, I only see like 4 people at a time.
Right.
That's fine. So if it was roughly, I don't know, 220 something, 230, this proposed budget is 250. Did I hear that correctly, Matt?
Matt, you're on mute.
Yeah, I mean, good. We believe so. We're just verifying it right now, Councilmember. We want to make sure it's the accurate number possible.
All right, good. And then, because we spoke about Novak, but, and this is something you can get back later on. In this proposed budget, how much of it is for consultants? I mean, that's something you can email back later on if you don't.
Citywide, your citywide consulting.
Right, citywide, how much of it is for consultants?
Maybe we should get a list of those too.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah. Listen, Councilman Greg, I hear you on the tax increase, but we have big problems with keeping our people. We're gonna have to generate some more revenue increases, but it definitely ought to be targeted towards our people.
Councilmember Waring, the current year's total budget is approximately $234 million.
234?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And this proposed budget, I thought I heard you say about roughly 250 million.
Roughly, yes, sir.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Including enterprise, Matt?
Yes,
Okay, so that's including enterprise.
correct. Yes.
I think the regular items were about a little over 200.
And year over year, you know how we normally have a, I guess, increase in property values, which tend to have a little, from properties being sold and reassessed at higher values. What was the bump up, I guess, estimated going from 21 to 22? on the revenue side.
Just on the property taxes?
Right,
Six
just,
or something.
yeah, just on property tax.
It's been the reassessment year too.
We're done with the reassessment.
Yeah, reassessment was last year,
Yeah.
but every year, well, most years we have a little, I don't know,
Right.
$7 or $8 million bump up just because of real estate sales taking place throughout the year, et cetera.
Excuse me, I thought reassessment was done in
Waring
2020.
discuss my property tax bill?
Yeah, I was on when you were talking about
Okay.
that. Yeah.
The millage was exactly the same. And so I saw a reduction just based upon the LOST contribution. Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I pulled out some of my property tax bills. And I hadn't opened them up yet. I got them all packed up here, but I mean,
And you got some properties there. I only got.
Yeah.
I know we pay for a couple employees now.
Well, you're in the business, I get it.
Keep it up, council member.
Yeah, you're right. It's the time of year is not too happy to own them at this time of year, I tell you that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Waring,
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna let Kathy Mercer talk about property taxes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so if you compare budget to budget from 21 to what we're recommending, or we are estimating for 2022, it actually goes down
Really?
about 1.7 million dollars. But that is strictly because our local option revenue took such a hit with the pandemic that our tax credit factor had fallen substantially. We're putting our tax credit, we recommend to put our tax credit factor back to a higher amount based on the increase in revenue. So we lost revenue in the property tax area because of getting additional local option sales tax revenue, because the growth is back in that local option revenue. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, not entirely, and I tell you why, because given some of the real estate sales that took place, I guess last year, that would generate, I would think, more taxes this year. In other words, if I had a house that was 100,000 and I sold it for 500,000, that new buyer has to pay taxes on that higher value.
That's right.
Right.
So,
Kathy, can you break down just the property tax revenue notwithstanding the LOST? If you know what I mean?
Not right off the top of my head, but I can't remember that 2020 was the reassessment year. So that's when all the values went up. So between 21 and 22, you're just going to have growth either from new properties or, if people did sell their home, then it would, they'd lose that 15% cap protection.
Right.
So I think our local option revenue went up a lot more than the 1.6 million that that the taxes are going down. The local option revenue went up about $6 million. So if you take the difference between the $6 million in local option revenue that we can get over and above what we got in 2020, or we're estimating for 2021, and then the 1.6 million, the taxes went down, you can see that the actual tax growth would have been the difference between those. So 4
or 5 million, something like that.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Any other questions, comments? Yeah, I was going to point out another way to look at it maybe is that last year a 1 mil increase was 1.6 million, and now this year it's 1.7.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
good pinch hitting. We'll have to give you a recommendation to our finance officer.
Not bad.
CFO, award of the day.
Woo!
You're no Vanna, but you're getting
I know
there.
Amy.
No, Amy, no.
Sure.
Let me
But
tell you,
I can read. I guess it shows I can read.
Thanks
when
to
you
your
pull-
mother.
when you pull
Thanks
out
to your
the,
mother.
when you pull out that example of your tax bill, you had all us pulling out our tax bill.
Going to look at mine.
Wait, here's a
Well-
question. What is the $99 residential fee? I didn't know that till one of my constituents asked me, so I had to find that out. Do you know, Mayor?
Yes, that's your county fee for solid waste and recycling.
All right, A+.
Mhm.
One last question, Mr. Mayor, I guess to Matt or whomever. How much do y'all have in revenue coming in from CWS? Is it the 1.09, 1,095,000?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, we got some more work to do over there.
Yeah.
We do.
Okay.
We do.
Have we gotten delinquencies?
No, that's not even talking about that. I'm just talking about, we had talked in terms of last year. We just got to revisit that conversation where for, I don't know, right about 20 years now, we've been getting $1,095,000 from CWS. And it hadn't kept pace with inflation. If it keeps pace with inflation, it would be, I don't know, close to 2.1 million or something like that, which would have the same purchasing power that it had back in 1996 or 7, whenever that was. And we had a good conversation last year, but we got to nail that into CWS's budget so we can have that additional revenue coming to us in our general fund, which is about another $1 million, which would repeat itself. That's before the delinquency.
Okay, and with the delinquency, do we have any idea what that amount would be, and would that take care of our deficit?
I don't know about that part because that's going to go like towards stormwater if it does go into.
That's right, that's right.
Go to general fund.
That's
As a matter
right.
of fact, it was 1996. I have it in front of me when they started paying $1,095,000. So from 1996 up until last year, they had been paying us $1,095,000. They gave us another $1 million last year. But and the reason I just to give you the rest of the story, we provide in large part the growth to CWS, and we take the hits. We take the hits for the high density. We take the hits for the growth on Johns Island. We take the hits for Laurel Island. But all that's future growth. They can't have that kind of growth without us. We're a team. But you just can't do in 2022 what you could in 1996 with $1,095,000. So I don't think it's not a hard conversation. I've asked Wesley, Mayor, to use his calculations at the rate of inflation from 1996 to now to see what that number is. Just need to circle back with him, but we're about to finalize the budget over there. So that would be, Amy would say, listen, one-time money, I appreciate that, but we need to have it dollars that repeat themselves. Okay.
Well, the important thing also for the future is just to factor that payment with some cost of living increase, for lack of a better description.
Yeah, so we wouldn't have to revisit it.
Just
So,
index it so it goes up every
Councilmember,
year.
let's talk offline, and
Okay.
we need to go back and do it one more time.
You'll do it.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else not being heard? We will see you next Tuesday, if not sooner.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you,
meeting.
everyone, for your
Thank you.
patience and